One thing I will not understand, and I have not understood, is why don't we speak more directly to the targeting of Christians and religious minorities, but specifically Christians. You're not going to have shared values with a society that is based on Islam. You're just not. And that's not a statement of hate. That's a statement of reality and the doctrine of Islam. And this is not an opportunity where this gets silly because people say you're bashing Islam. No. Bruce Thornton, who comes on the show on occasion, he comes on once a week. He's amazing. And he's written a number of books. He's a research fellow at the Hoover Institution. He's an historian. And he was talking about how when you have people stand up for human rights, and oftentimes those that are looked at through the world's eyes and say they're lauded for their efforts, and sometimes there are blind spots to that effort or their past, as we've seen, not to say they haven't done something extraordinary, be it Mandela or Gandhi, but those people were only allowed, that was only allowed to happen through societies that were based on and influenced by a Judeo-Christian foundation that so often came from the West, be it through colonialization or otherwise. And that gets me to the point where, if you just joined us, we had Ryan Morrow on, who's an outstanding writer and does great work, and we were talking about his article for the Muslim Brotherhood and just how far they've penetrated our own government. Not in a conspiratorial way. It's not much of a conspiracy. It's pretty well known for anybody who wants to take a good look at what they are. They've been declared a terrorist group in Egypt. We won't do it. We have supported the Muslim Brotherhood, specifically Mohammed Morsi, the deposed president. Now, when we were talking about that, before that, we talked about things going on in Iraq and the fact that you did have, you have attacks on Christians, bombing at a marketplace most recently on Christmas, yesterday. And that's Al-Qaeda targeting Christians. You also had Muslims come out and help out the victims and help actually rebuild in places where there have been bombings, the churches. And that's an extraordinary story. But you don't win the hearts and minds of those Muslims who are doing the right thing and helping out the victims of Islamic terrorists by being silent about what we stand for, what we believe in, and why our values, what is the foundation for our values, why we have shared values with Israel. And you don't do it by apologizing and stating history without context, as the president has done over time, criticizing our actions as an American president going overseas and saying, getting sidetracked in Iraq. Well, I think the president's realizing Iraq was just a front on the war that we are in overall. But I don't know if he realizes it, not because he desires America to be threatened with a nuclear weapon from Iran. That's what's going to happen with his policies. Make no mistake, it's going to happen. And Israel's going to it's on its way there. First and foremost, Israel will be, because of the regional proximity. But bottom line, I don't think that's his desire. I think his ignorance and his willful blindness should be confronted by those in the press corps, and when they try it, they should talk about history and understanding how the Iranian regime and those in terrorist groups, be it the Muslim Brotherhood, or we can go to Al-Qaeda, we can go to Hamas, we can go to Hezbollah, which is an arm of Iran, Iran's government. We can go to the terrorists on both sides now in Syria. They don't get it by us saying, hey, look, we're going to treat you more respectfully, and we're going to buy into your ridiculous propaganda that says this is all caused by Gitmo. No, we're going to take a good look at history, and well, we can go all the way back centuries. And we can go back and look at history and the history of Muslims and, well, Western governments, Christian governments, and you can see the behavior and what's worked and what hasn't worked. They are being seen as the strong horse right now, the terrorists and the terrorist groups overall, be they of the Shia, Khomeiniist, or the Al-Qaeda, Islamist, Salafist. They are being seen as a strong horse. In the 1996 letter that Osama bin Laden detailed what the fight was and what the struggle was and what his purpose was, he talks about the weak horse and strong horse, and we're being viewed as the weak horse. And it's amazing because we're the strongest militarily, but more importantly, we're, well, as important, especially in this day and age, is that we have the truth on our side, and we need to talk about our values and why our society is not on the same level as one based on Islam. And people get real uncomfortable with that. But if you look at Islam with a two-tiered system and subjugation and well, treatment of women, homosexual, you could go down the line. Second-class status versus one that's based on a Judeo-Christian foundation. It's not even close. I'm not a multiculturalist. I don't buy into it. I don't buy moral relativism. I think that's the huge problem. I think, and it's interesting because during crisis, what happens? Sooner or later, this happens. We get hit so hard, as we did on 9/11, that somebody wakes up and says, what have you all been doing? Ignoring the threat. For the last 30 years, these people have been at war with you. We're not at war with them. They're at war with you, and you better engage, and you better win it. You better not base your calculations on politics. You better base them on victory. And when you talk about our soldiers, you don't put a number on the amount of troops based on a compromise of, or a tier lower than what the generals requested in their lowest amount that they requested. I'm referring specifically to Afghanistan. It's not about politics. Now, politics is the art of what's possible, and there's a political element to every war, every battle, in the sense that, hey, we've got to talk to the American people of what we're doing and what we stand for and why we're doing it. You don't ignore the people. You don't ignore the troops you say you care so much about for the last 4.5 ripping years. Pardon me, sir. And I'm speaking to the president. Oh, we support our troops, not in the way of giving them a path to victory, not in the way of rules of engagement, not in the way of speaking the truth about what we stand for, what we've stood for, and what the American soldier and the American armed forces have been, which is the greatest liberating force for good. It gets me. And what also, as the enemy gathers and gets stronger, and by the way, there's other enemies as well, big ones, Russia and China. This is not going away, and it's going to bite us. I pray it doesn't, but it's going to bite us big time. And then you're going to get those folks who go, I react purely on emotion, which is dangerous and myopic, because then you just go, I just want to hurt somebody and go. You don't go look at the enemy and say, okay, here's the enemy. Here's what we need to do. Here's victory. Here's the definition of victory. Let's do it. Let's do it, because if we don't, we're going to lose more lives inevitably, and we're going to lose ground. And as leader of the free world, which the president is, whether he likes it or not, he's got a responsibility, and we do have that purpose. And then you get some folks who say, we don't want to be the policeman of the world. Well, okay. Well, tell me, who's going to be the policeman of the world? I'm saying, first and foremost, American interest. I'm not for blood specifically, and treasure be spent on, hey, Pax Americana, let's go. It's cool. Let's just go. And it's for freedom's sake. No, I'm saying it makes us more secure. And we better, anytime we put troops in harm's way, have a vital national security interest. But I would argue that when you let threats grow and continue to grow, that sooner or later, that becomes a vital national security interest. And the difference is you could have addressed it when the enemy was much weaker, but you decided to wait till they gain strength because you never really want to deal with anything until it gets to that crisis point. And if you're on the left, you're blind to it until you get smacked with it. And that smack comes in the form of a very large butcher's bill. And it's sad and it's sick. But there's something about freedom and the idea of peace. And peace is not simply a state of where there's no conflict. Because if that's the case, then North Korea is peaceful. Iran is somewhat peaceful. China is peaceful. And they do that through coercion of government coercion, suppression, subjugation. No, that's not what I'm looking for. So if I look for peace, I'm not going to look for peace. I'm going to look for freedom because that will bring peace. And as we think about what our role is in the world and what we stand for and what our culture stands for, I think it's time we need some honesty, and I think it's time we need to stop having a foreign policy that's undermining our national security, be it slowly or quickly, because it is. Syria is going to be a huge cost. We've undermined Israel big time. And the idea that we've had presidents throughout always look at, it's a conflict, and we'll bring a two-state solution. Hey, guess what? What do you have to do first before you rebuild? This is a big lesson for those. And I can see myself being a neocon at times, absolutely. But the first thing you do, you got to win the war. You got to win it. And then you rebuild or help rebuild. But you must defeat your enemy and their ideology. And so it is in the dustbin of history, like Nazism. We haven't done that. And we haven't had the approach to do it yet. And quite frankly, we are seeing things that are not there, and we are willfully blind to the things that are there. And it's frustrating because we see this, and I always look at these events, be it the attacks on Christians or what's happening in Egypt and declaring the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist group. And I think to myself, how is this? It automatically goes into this history book that I see of all the events leading up to something like with Iran. And believe you me, be it Chamberlain or Obama, our president, President Obama, it doesn't work out well. So, just some thoughts regarding our national security and freedom and our approach to it and our obligation. I don't understand the idea, we're not the world's policeman. Well, okay, now who is? And immediately it's a straw man argument, because I'm not talking about going into each and every place and invading and doing nothing. I'm talking about making sure we act in our vital national security interests. And if we see a threat that's already bitten us big time, 3,000 plus in 9/11, but 30 years, you have a much bigger butcher's bill overall, you do something about it. We're making Edward Snowden a hero. How ridiculous is that? Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, AFR Talk.